activities. For this activity, we handpicked people who are industry experts from across the country, and all these sessions can be done online across the globe for any corporate company. Just adding a few more points to it, we all know that mental wellness is the need of the hour, and all companies are facing this, that the employee being at home and they are stressed out and how to deal with them. So we have expert corporate counselors from across India on board with us, who are helping corporates doing these online group sessions and helping employees sail through the tough times, basically. On the fitness front, we have experts from yoga, group workouts, etc., who will conduct these live sessions and help employees stay fit. Of course, not to forget the kids at home, because it's a summer vacation going on and parents are trying to juggle between working from home and taking care of the kids at home. So we're doing a lot of activity-based online sessions like clay modeling, watercolor painting, etc., to keep the kids engaged. So Housecast believes that this wellness program will help out the HR fraternity out there in keeping their people engaged and establish a great work-life balance. As you all know, my name is Pavitra. I'll be co-hosting this live panel discussion hosted by Housecast, and the topic is majorly changing role of HR during these turbulent times. Our panel members for this webinar are prestigious business leaders from different industries who come with vast experience, and they are here to share their insights over the current topic. With this, I would like to welcome our first panel member for today, Shashank Bhushan. Shashank, he with a career spanning of 24 years, Shashank has been with BMC Software since November 2010. Prior to joining BMC, he was the Vice President HR at IBM India, Bangalore. As a head of India operations, BMC Software, Shashank has been passionately driving a three-point agenda of building skills for the future, enhancing the culture of the innovation, and building partnership in the ecosystem. He has a deep experience in the HR, business partnering, talent acquisition, talent management, OD, and usage of analytics to drive the changing behavior. He is also a trained executive and life coach and works with many leaders and colleagues to coach them and help achieve their potential. Thank you, Shashank, for joining us today.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks.
Yeah. My next panel member is Priya. Hi, Priya. Basically, with more than 2 decades of experience in HR leadership in various industries across India, Singapore, and Malaysia, Priya manages HR for the India operations of SunGuard Availability Services, along with being one of the board of directors. She has experience of working across multiple industry segments spanning from IT, manufacturing, financial services, and retail. Priya has dealt with organizational effectiveness manuals and ranging from talent management strategy to organization development interventions. Welcome, Priya. Thank you for joining us today.
Pleasure to be here.
Our third panelist today is Sulekha Thakkar. Sulekha is again an experienced HR professional working with Icertis, and she has experience of more than 20 years in advertising, corporate communication, and HR. Sulekha has been working with Icertis since the last 8 years and has been one of the founding members. She's helped the company grow and take it from 40 employee organization to 1,000 employee globally. Now I'd like to invite our moderator for the session, Ms. Sharmila Bhide, who's also a founder of Housecast and co-founder of Calsoft. So over to you, Sharmila. Before that, meanwhile, in the audience, if you have any questions, you can please post your questions, and we'll take the questions at the end of the session. Over to you, Sharmila.
Thanks, Pavitra. Hi, Priya, Sulekha, and Shashank.
Hello.
Hi.
So it's lovely to have you on the panel, and looking forward to really lively and thought-provoking discussion out here. So I know we've been talking about this for some time now, but today we are really in the midst of a major disruption in pretty much everything in our lives, whether it's personal, professional. And I think it's been about 2 months and some when we transitioned to the work from home completely, literally overnight, like without any planning. Today, when most of us and the employees are kind of in a found some semblance of normalcy in their daily lives out here, there are some of the companies have begun to talk about how to get back to the workplace and when and where. And so again, there are more uncertainties going around there. to me as an HR person, this must be exciting and challenging times out here. This should have and must have tested you and your team's abilities to quickly change and adapt overnight your roles, your priorities, your communication channels, the way you engage to continue connecting with the employees. I'm sure this has encouraged you to push your boundaries, and probably some of you might have come up with completely random or different solutions that you otherwise would have never dreamt of or never had been pushed to think of. I want to focus today's discussion on just the fundamental role of HR and how the role has changed in today or will be required to change with these disruptive times. These times are here to stay. It's not like just a 2-month lockdown. I'm sure all of you must have seen your roles changing over the span of your careers, but this is a kind of an evolving change, which is normal in every business function out here. As companies evolve, the roles evolve. What has happened out here is that the compression of 5 to 7 years has happened overnight, literally, and the timelines have just been compressed. So all functions in an organization, finance, recruiting, admin, engineering, everything have to change, are changing or have to change to this new norm. And I want to understand from you all how and what needs to change in the HR, your processes, priorities, working methods to quickly catch up and keep up with what is going on, pretty much changing every day as we speak. So just so I'll start with the Q&A, but while I address the question specifically to one of you out here with all your experiences and expertise out here, I'm sure you all will have different perspectives that you want to add to the table out here, and feel free to jump in. The aim is to make it an open discussion and have more rather than HR head out here. So do you honestly believe an HR and a company goals today in the scenario are aligned well out here? And if not, then what can we do, or how can we ensure that they're always aligned in the same fashion?
Thank you very much, Shamila. This is a good question and a bouncer, you know, to be there for the opening batsman.
I was debating whether I should sort of.
All right. So let me say this. I think the feeling would be very mutual for finance and HR.
Yes.
You know, and I can see the heads nodding there, and I'm sure it is. But let me say this. I think with all seriousness, these are all business functions, right? Whether it's HR or finance or sales or marketing. So whatever we do insofar as our roles are concerned are driven by the business objective. And so long the HR function aligns itself to what the business objectives are, you would find value to it. You may disagree with it because there might be a cost, there might be a value that you may not, be able to see, immediately. But having said that, none of these functions are independent by themselves. I think the problem happens when each of these management functions drive their own agenda in their own silos. But there are 2-3 things important. One is the role of the executive. How well is the executive driving consistency of understanding of what the common goals of the organization are. And second, for the CHROs to really say that, well, this is, of course, as a CHRO, your role is to look after people, you're the chief human resources officer, whatever it is. So your focus is of taking care of people and making sure that you're able to attract and retain the best talent possible. But why? I think that's the question that you should never ask, never stop asking. Why are we doing what we are doing? If the focus is on retention, then why? Retention for whom? Who are we wanting to retain? How are we doing it? Does everything require money? And the more you ask these why questions, you'll get to those minute answers, which sometimes are glossed over. Because everybody's in a hurry. Everybody wants to get things done and move on to the next big challenge. And there is enough and more, and everybody's there. So I will just step back on this and say, I don't think HR functions are misaligned. I don't believe that. So I don't think the HR functions want to throw money for all problems that are there. But it's important that HR functions start to think more like businesses. Many of them do, and as business owners. And I think that convergence is the need of the hour.
Yeah, yeah. Do you think I always, so when one of the KRAs for an HR person is controlling attrition, is that the problem that causes this thing? Because when you need to control attrition, one of the easy, quick, and I agree with you, it should be a long-term thing, not a knee-jerk immediate thing. But one of the immediate thing is, let's just keep the person on board. And
I think the problem is that the organization see retention control as the HR's KRA. It is actually not the KRA of the HR function. It is the KRA of each and every business line. HR is a one facilitator which will provide maybe avenues, options, opportunities, different methodologies for helping the business contain the attrition. And let's also realize the other thing. And sometimes we miss this very often. Our growth has not been great as a country last 12 months or so, but we're still a developing economy. We have been growing well enough, which means that people have more opportunities than what we would really like to do as employers, which is a good thing. Right? So zero attrition is not the target that anybody would like to have. So as organizations, and this is the role of the HR is to help managers and leaders understand and come up with what's the optimum level of attrition that you would like to have. So retention is not a HR job, but education about what is attrition and what, if you would necessarily have attrition, what kind of attrition is good for you and what is bad. And then what do you do to retain people that you don't want to lose? So I just took that as an example, but again, it goes back to the whys of any question on why do you need to do what you're doing.
Right. Yeah, I hear you. Absolutely. Yeah, true. So Priya, recently I was reading up an article and there was an MIT study about how the role of an HR by nature is service oriented. And therefore it is very process driven. Your whether you're onboarding or connects or whatever, it's very process driven and not exactly designed for agility. So in the current scenario where every day is bringing in new legal rules, other rules, challenges, new norms, everything out here, do you believe your team has been quick on their feet and agile to cope up with these daily changes? Or do you think in general, not just you in person, but do you think in general this process-driven part of it is going to be proved to be a HR's Achilles heel out here, that they can't quickly adapt? I could be wrong. I'm just putting it on.
No, that's true. No, so actually, if you ask me, it's literally been baptism by fire. I mean, if I were to put it in terms of how the world has changed, and COVID to me is just something which is there today. Tomorrow it could be something else. Yeah. And to be fair, HR, we've been trying to evolve to handle this rapid change. I mean, all of us keep hearing about this VUCA world being the buzzword and stuff, right? I mean, COVID is just another way of maybe representing the VUCA world, right? And HR has already been in, I guess, the front and center of leading some of this change in the thought process. But having said that, I think COVID just made it all in hyperdrive mode. I mean, we just couldn't even, though we thought we were all prepared, to be able to handle change. I think when COVID hit us, I think it just came completely, out of the blue. So to me, I think, when I was thinking about, kind of reflecting on what it is, I think it's not so much agility, but more of flexibility, right? Because I think that's the need for HR today, if you ask me. I mean, we need to strive to create flexibility in our processes, policies, and I guess most importantly, the mindset, because that will help us adapt and be agile. I feel that if you're not going to be able to have the flexibility, agility can be very short-lived, or even you being agile can have long-term ramifications, right? So, I mean, in my mind, like to give like an analogy, if suddenly you ask somebody one day to just get up and, run a 100-meter sprint, you might maybe clock your personal best because, you have the initial maybe push to do it. But the fact is that the aches and pains that will follow after that are going to be absolutely debilitating, right? So, but if you had trained your body to kind of be flexible, it could be that any day you're asked to run a sprint or a marathon, you might still not be absolutely perfect, but at least you will not have any major negative effects, right? So I think COVID has kind of just made us start to realize that we need to constantly keep thinking how to make our policies, processes, and the entire framework a lot more flexible. Like I said, today it could be COVID, tomorrow it could be the cyclone that's coming in, right? I mean, there's just so much that's happening in the world right now that we have to be prepared as HR professionals. And, to add on to what Shashank said, I think we are moving a lot away from just being purely a service delivery function. I think we're truly becoming a lot more business partnering function. And I think that a lot of times, and try, at the risk of sounding controversial, I think we do hide a lot behind the processes. Whereas flexibility in the mindset is really going to make us start questioning. I mean, to be very honest, I used to think, oh my God, how can you even think of doing onboarding like remotely? I mean, how can you send documentation? And how can you kind of, the technical aspect, maybe you could do it, but how do you do the personal connect? Like, how can you even think of onboarding somebody really well and integrating? But we have all been forced to think different. I mean, we cannot stop onboarding for 2.5 months, right? We have been able to figure that out, being able to do it successfully. And I'm sure each one of us has stories to share about that as well. So I think it's more a change in the mindset that I think all of us have had to kind of look at it. And I think that's where it is. So not really an Achilles heel. and that's actually where the analogy of the running came in. But it is more of a change. Yes, it is flexibility. I guess, that's to me the more important thing than agility is flexibility and having an open mind.
Right.
Which I think is the need of the hour.
I like your analogy of the marathon versus the sprint. It's so true out here. This is what happened. We all had to sprint out of our things out here overnight, literally. But yeah, very true. Yeah. So Sulekha, I know you, what do you believe today in this environment is topmost on the minds of your employees out here when you daily connect with them, talk to them out here? How as a HR person can you help allay these insecurities? Or what are you doing at iCertis to take care of these things?
Yeah, so I think as I was talking earlier, right, that COVID struck us really when we were just unprepared. We were not aware of it, and one fine day, we just said, oh, we are not going to the office now. So there were the regular fears that employees started having. So the first thing iCertis did when we started working from home much earlier than any other company, perhaps in Pune, because we started maybe the 10th of March is when we were started working from home. And so the first fear that people had is what happens to my EMIs that will come my way. So will the paychecks get affected? So that month we actually preponed our payroll. So we had to do a lot of things to juggle because the desktops were not in the office. So, the payroll vendor was not supporting us at that time. So our admin team had to run around and get some desktop delivered at the payroll partner's house. So that was the first thing that we did, was just ensure that people are going to be, they are going to be safe, they feel comfortable that nothing is going to happen. We soon started getting a lot of all hands that our CEO started doing it himself. So earlier our frequency has been once in a quarter or something. So in this COVID times, we are almost doing once in a fortnight that our CEO talks to people. So he ensures that we have a safe environment for all the employees, even at home. We have been ensuring that there are people, if there have been any cases of fear of or any people where leaders are talking to the employees, ensuring that business is going all the right direction. So Samir, our CEO, updates us on the business focus that's happening over the quarter, and he ensures that everything is going well. So if I look at it from an iSertion point of view, I think that fear is no longer there, because we've also told them that we are not going to be laying off employees. So that has been a big, I think, a relief to most of the people, and people are hearing, right, that there have been layoffs in some companies, there are gossips happening, there are WhatsApps getting forwarded. So I think that way we have taken good care in that sense, and I think that has helped us a lot.
Okay, nice. So so in the minds of the employees at iCERT, job security is not an issue. So if you had to pinpoint one thing, what would it be? You think people are today worried about, or any of you?
So I think right now, if you ask me, the majority of the population is worried what happens, when do we get back to work? Because many of them are really, there are situations at home where people are not very comfortable working from home also all the time. So while this is a big boom to most of the people, there are some people, especially people who are outstation, who really don't know. They don't have a strong internet connectivity at home. So, they are at a fear where what happens next. They are paying rents for their houses. They don't know what to do, whether they stay here, they go back here. In fact, I was just talking to Priya earlier that we've announced a timeline till January when people should resume from work. That's an extended timeline that we've taken.
Yeah, it is.
And we have promised them we are going to give them 2 months of notice if at all things change. So we are gearing up for that.
Okay. So Shashank, so this is a question about, again, one of these, like you would say, the bouncers that go off the pitch out here immediately. This is a question about collaboration and data sharing amongst HRs in various companies out here. I strongly believe that if all the, and I'm sure you all will also agree, for all the HR people worked in a collaborative fashion, it could serve as a win-win situation for both the company and the employees. Things that I can imagine that data that could be shared is essentially we go through these exercises of benchmarking of salaries and policies and perks and everything out here, which we do it in kind of calling up people, and that's how we get our information out here. But there could possibly be a clean way of doing this. On the flip side, also things like absconding employees, no-shows, job hoppers, which are detrimental to a company when a person like that shows up. And if there was some kind of a catalog or something that was a registry out there, that would have helped us so much. So in your experience, do you believe it is ever possible to come up with some kind of a platform for sharing data while maintaining obviously the confidential nature that each company needs to keep in place about people? And so, I mean, this is this fine line that we have to walk, and is it at all possible? Or is this just a wild
two things. One, Sharmila, I think it's a very important question that I'm sure all of us, have thought about it at some point in time. There's a fair bit of collaboration amongst the HR professionals, much more than you'd realize.
Yeah.
I think we would talk to each other a lot. We get a lot of information. We share a lot of information which would be taboo to really share outside of your organization. And then there are structured methodologies of the Towers and Watson, etc., by which we get a lot of information. I think what is really missing is what you alluded to, is that we do not have a common repository of sorts where, for example, if I'm hiring somebody from iCERT, can I get to know whether his conduct was right or wrong? We'll not hire. Don't worry. You've hired people from us. Yeah. So I remember about 15 years back, NASSCOM had started an initiative. I was at Bangalore then, and they had created a registry of employees, where every new employee had to go register into that first, and then so I was at IBM, and people used to go register in that office, used to get that information. What it used to do was like, if somebody was a job hopper, somebody did not disclose a few companies that they worked in, it would get flagged off. So the problem is that, we are all in an era of fast food, right? We want to cook our noodles in 2 minutes. And so partly as leaders, as professionals, we are responsible for this mess that we are in. If we were to say no to a candidate who's walking around with 2 offer letters in his bag and saying, up it up by 10% and I'll join you, and push him back, I think these behaviors will change. But as recruiters, as organizations, you also hamstruck you want your skills to be on board so quickly, and there is a demand supply gap. So I think till such time that there's a demand supply gap, this is going to be very, very difficult. And second, I think even from an employee perspective, candidate perspective, I mean, you want to create a level playing field, right? I mean, organizations choose candidates amongst options of candidates that they have. Why should the employee be, denied that opportunity? So if a candidate goes around and shops for offer letters, you create a registry like that because you are powerful, more powerful than the employees are. I think that would also be unfair. So we have to find some, better mechanism. Maybe, an equivalent of Glassdoor, which is employer-based, maybe, a candidate-based. But that is something that we'll have to really think through how will that work with all the privacy concerns and everything that is there. And I think what I keep hearing is that India privacy laws are going to be a lot more stringent than what the European laws are. So if that be the true outcome of times to come, so it's even more complex. I'm optimistic, but I don't have a solution.
No, but I love the idea of your Glassdoor for employees out here. I don't know how, but that is something. I guess like you said, it's the question of demand versus supply, and everyone needs to get the person on board as soon as possible, and that causes it. But whenever this stabilizes the situation, probably the norms will set in that are fair to everyone out here. Possibly, yeah. Fine. So Priya, so clearly, Shashank, I guess you must be doing your top level communications for BMC, and Sulekha, you said iCertis, the CEO has been very hands-on and doing this communication. So you both probably have not faced this issue. Priya, I'm not sure whether you face it, but I know we have faced it. So I want to ask you this. So this time around with that sudden lockdown has prompted the communication from the top management about the shutdown and the implications, long-term implications, short-term implications to employees. And because it happened in such a snap fashion out here, there wasn't the normal HR coaching that happens to the CXOs that, okay, this is your message, but say it this way so that the employees don't get upset, or that kind of thing. There wasn't that much time to happen out here. So basically, how has this affected your individual role, if this is the thing that you got into? Have you found yourself becoming a translator or mediator of communication made by the CXO to the employees out here? And has this put you in a difficult spot? Essentially, the CXOs probably speak at a different level, and they have some big picture that they've thrown out there, which might not be sit well with the employees out here. And then they come to you out here. How do you handle their queries and questions and interpret it correctly? Is this something that you faced?
Yeah, so, I mean, in general, we've had obviously the CEOs cascade most of the messages. I mean, that's typically how it happens within SunGard as well. Mm-hmm. But I think what has changed during this time is most of the messages either would be very localized, right? Because either whether it's an employee welfare thing or if it's something to do with the specific site, it would be pretty much localized. I mean, this was the first time, I guess, the entire organization kind of went through a same problem altogether. So obviously the communication came from a much broader perspective. So yes, there was a challenge in terms of how to be able to still get the local nuances into it, right? Because what a US can do and what a UK can do or France can do might not be what an India can do. The realities were very different. So I think what it made us, I mean, the thing we had to do differently was, I guess, the regional HR directors had to be a lot more connected. I think in the last couple of years that I have been with SunGard, I don't think I've spoken to the regional HR directors as much as I have in the last 2 months, because you know, we have had to be on the same page to come up with some common messaging. Obviously, the individual local messaging is still the responsibility for us as HR and cascading it to the, you know, creating our local policies or whatever practices to be able to equip, you know, with the change. But yes, I mean, we had to kind of ensure that the global communication at least takes into account all the major geographies and is not very, I would say, biased towards any one particular geography or the way they are doing it. So even simple things like, you know, we had to start mandatory work from home like much before the India lockdown happened. And because, you know, that's how it was there in the US, France, UK. I mean, they had a lot more cases at that point in time. So people did question us that, you know, why are we doing it in India? I mean, is it really required? I mean, obviously in hindsight it helped, but you know, so those were the kind of things that we had to really maneuver and give and take and have those conversations. And the other aspect as well. I mean, in US, UK, they had a lot more incidents of COVID within employees. Thankfully, we didn't have. But still we had to kind of follow the global process of trackers and ensuring that contact tracing is happening properly. So it just gave us a lot more, I guess, opportunity to exchange information and share best practices. But yeah, I mean, generally the cascading ultimately did become HR's responsibility, to be honest. I mean, yes, there were broad messages which did happen at the CXO level, but the individual cascading to the employee level, we had to do a lot more. I mean, we had to really crystallize that. We had to do a lot more, I guess, HR Connect meetings, roundtables, open houses, even go into a lot of manager meetings to be able to kind of give them the outline of what does the global message mean to each one of them as individual business units and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, it was interesting. And it still continues to be interesting even now that we're thinking of the return to work.
Right.
I mean, the similar challenges, right? I mean, it's not one glove cannot fit everybody. So again, it's a lot more of what will work in other countries might not work here and vice versa.
Yeah. And I think for you guys, the different countries and different timelines in which the COVID started and peaked and now get back to work is also different, right? So you literally cannot have the same policy for everyone out here. Wow. Okay.
But still we had to find some common, thread, because the business units ultimately operate across geographies, right? Managers have employees across different geographies. So there had to be certain basic common things that we had to follow and then kind of customize it for each geography.
Makes sense. Yeah. So Sulekha, the normal, I mean, the HR mantra that generally I see people following is that the employee experience should mirror the customer experience. Do you agree with this? And what are some of the ways that you go about achieving this while keeping that business angle in your head?
I think with the innovation of HR, now things are very, very different. So an employee HR as a function has now become more of a business alignment, the way Shashank was mentioning earlier. It's absolutely, it's a different, it's like by itself, it's a function by itself. And so equally true is the employee experience. And I think when we are talking about an employee experience, people have now started correlating an employee experience to a customer experience. So when we talk about happy employees, it also is equal to a happy customer sort of a thing. So there have been surveys where people have talked about productivity increasing, turnover increasing, where organizations have been able to retain more employees, where the employee retention has been more, where the employees' growth in the organization has been much better. So these are small little factors that have started gaining a huge proportion over the next couple of days. And I think with this current situation where employee and HR focus is the primary thing, I'm not saying that business is not important, but I think HR and employee experience is going to be equally important in these times. And I think this is where HR is going to play a very big role because there are insecurities at certain, where certain places where people are not really very unsure about what's happening next. So I think if we improve on the employee experience and if we treat them like the royal people around us, which we should definitely do, is going to help us a lot.
Right. Yeah. I think all of you HR for IT companies out there, which is all about people and it's people centric out there, definitely is the fundamental glue
employee
to the
engagement. Yeah, employee engagement has become one of the most the things to do now. It's very, very critical.
So Shashank, I was reading up a bit about you before, and I read in one of your interviews about how BMC uses the 9-box talent segmentation to categorize the employees. And I know at CalSoft, we were kind of brainstorming how to implement this. And so since you have experience with it, would you like to share some tips on how to implement the pros and cons, or like what makes it the right tool to use for appraisal cycles, or which companies should, which companies shouldn't? Any advice, any tips?
Okay, so 9boxes is a generic tool. I think it's been in existence for a very long time. Became popular from GE under Jack Welch.
Okay.
And what it does is that you categorize people that you have on a true access of performance and potential, and bucket them into 9 boxes. And then you take differentiated action based on which box people happen to be. It's seemingly a very simple exercise because one of the vectors is performance, which is easy to measure. Relatively, all of us have performance data available for us. The complexity is when you measure the potential, which we define as ability, aspiration, and engagement. So a combination, combined factors of ability, aspiration, and engagement. Now the challenge is in using the 9 boxes that, before I come to that, it's a tool. Just like any tool that is available. This only helps you to do what you want to do for your employees, with your employees. Now, how you use it is the big deal about it, right? You can take you can do a 9-box exercise for 1,000 people organization and be done with in like matter of couple of hours. Or if you're serious, you might take a couple of weeks to really get to the final outcomes that you drive. So the real magic is not in the boxes. The real magic is in the conversations that those boxes drive. So when you categorize an employee into a particular box, the conversation between the HR partner, the manager, the leader, the executive is around why and what makes you say the ability is high or the aspiration is high or the engagement levels are low. How does that one person compare to the other? If you have a successor for, say, a box one, which is the top talent box for us, where is that successor located? Which box is the successor located? And very often you find out that the successor for a top talent is sitting in box 7 or box 5, because that's where the skill is available. Then you start to question and say, okay, so what is your plan to elevate the capabilities and the potential of that individual who's sitting in box 5 to be a real successor for that box 1 candidate? And if you do not have, if you think that is too hard to achieve in a realistic time frame, then what is your alternate strategy? Many times, for example, succession planning and 9-box work very differently. Many organizations don't have a methodology of that. You simply place people in a box to say, I'll be a successor to, say, Sharmila in 18 months. And those are time frames that are traditionally being used: 18 months, 24 months, 36 months onwards. But in 18 months, Shashank is not going to magically become as great and as good as Sharmila. But there has to be some, maybe never. Yeah. So there has to be a much more structured intervention to say, what are the gaps and what are you going to do to fill those gaps, so that come 18 months when Sharmila moves on to some better job or moves out of the organization, Shashank is ready to fill in that. Okay. Which is why I'm saying it is the conversation that drives the 9-box. It is not the boxes that really drive the process.
Okay. So you are using this at BMC for succession planning, not as an appraisal tool.
No, we don't use it for appraisal. We use it for succession planning. We use it. It's a segmentation tool, right? You segment your talent to drive differentiated action. So you have a box 1 employee. You're saying box 1 is high on potential, high on performance. Perhaps that person is more ready for the next level job in next maybe 12 months time. So then you help prepare that person for that job. Now, the other thing that we do very consciously is that they might be, say, for example, in a team of 30 people, there are 5 people in box 1. The old philosophy would have been one size fits all. You do the same development plan, maybe same retention strategies for all those 5 people. Whereas now, you become a little bit more sophisticated with a lot more data that is available. So now you can drive differentiated action. Somebody gets ticked on with money. Somebody gets ticked on with an opportunity of travel. Somebody, so then you start to build those, more details of what will retain that individual, what will make that person grow faster, so that when the next opportunity is there, people are available.
So this needs mature people to handle this, right? I mean, because this is you're evaluating something as vague as the potential of a person out here.
It takes time for organizations to mature, not just the managers and people. We started 9-box usage in I think 2012, 2013. So it's almost 6-7 years. And in the first stage, just to give an example, we created some guidance on what percentage of people should be in different boxes. And so box 1, 2, and 3 we categorize as the talent that we should not really lose and do everything possible to retain and raise their morale. And we found that initially when leaders came up with the 9 boxes, they had, stacked up 70% of the organization into box 1, 2, and 3. Because that's the tendency, right? You don't want to be seen as a leader who has underperforming organization, people in your team.
Yeah.
So it takes some time to educate and help people understand that it is not your evaluation as a leader or as a manager. It is an evaluation of what kind of people you have. And by the way, all organizations need to have all kinds of people. You need to have top talent, a small percentage. You need to have mediocre talent, because not everybody is going to run at a bolt speed. But you need somebody who are steady followers. Some people who are subject matter experts, who are kind of happy where they are, and they can mentor a lot of other people. And then there are going to be what we call as uncut diamonds, rough diamonds, because they have to be polished. They're new into this jobs, into the company. They need to go through some iterations of working and being evaluated before you could consider them. So I think it works all way. But certainly we don't use it for performance evaluation. We use it more for development purposes of people. And like I said, 7, 8 years now, we are getting to that level where you can really say with a lot of confidence that 4 different managers will rate people rather similar than dissimilar.
Okay. Wow. Priya, Sulekha, any of you have experience with this 9-box segmentation?
Yeah, so actually in SunGuard also we do use this. We don't do it every year. We do it once in 2 years. And like Shashank rightly mentioned, I think it is a very iterative process. And we primarily use it more from a succession planning kind of a thought process to be able to identify obviously the talent pool, what is available, where is it? And we only do it for leadership kind of roles, not for the entire organization. Because like we said, it requires a lot of time to be spent to do it the right way, because doing it the wrong way is a lot more detrimental than not doing it at all, actually. So, so we currently are doing it only for the leadership kind of roles, but we do it once in 2 years. And it's been a very interesting, I think, exercise because it kind of brings forward a lot of discussions which otherwise leaders are very hesitant to have, or rather I'm maybe hesitant, or maybe just don't find the time to have it, right? They're so busy with just dealing with the day-to-day business related aspects. These kind of, when you get into these conversations with different business unit leaders, it really kind of brings together the various perspectives that people have. And I think that's very good even for the business leaders to understand sometimes who they feel might be either their top talent or bottom talent, either which ways, is perceived very differently from somebody else outside of their sphere of influence, right? And sometimes I have seen major changes in ratings, kind of happen after the conversations have actually finished. So I mean, I love these discussions. Unfortunately, like I said, it takes a lot of time. And like you rightly said, Chandra, it requires a maturity to be able to accept that your view might not be right all the time. And, it takes a lot of maturity at a business leader level to accept it, that my view might not be the only perspective. And I need to be able to get into a room, be open to listening to everybody, and then if required, change.
Right.
And I think that's been interesting to see.
Okay.
But yeah, it's worked, definitely.
So yeah, one more tough question for you. Tough as in I find these questions tough. And just for those of you who don't know, HR kind of reports into me at Calsoft. I'm sort of saying this way because I'm not really an HR person. So, so how do you as an HR person handle difficult questions? So any advice to the HR people who are in the audience right now on how to answer questions relating to recession, job security, layoffs? I mean, you all are part of the management team where you know the writing on the wall, which could be either way.
To kind of openly talk about it. But I think what people I mean, at least in my experience, what I've realized is people come to you when they're just looking for, I guess, affirmation from HR, not really things that is completely new to them. Because frankly, they are at the center and front of the business. You know, they are the first ones who will know whether a client is renewing a contract, leaving, you know, what's the kind, if it's a salesperson, they would be the first ones to know what's the kind of business outline that, you know, or outlook that they have. So in most cases, they do have the enough information and data to know where the company is going and what could be the potential fallouts, both good and bad, right? I think they come to HR more for an affirmation, like I said. And I think in my experience, what has worked is I've always tried to be as honest, saying, you know what, you know the reality, you know what the situation is that the organization is going through right now, good or bad. I mean, people even come to us before merits, right? Saying, oh my God, are we going to get, like, you know, what's going to be the percentage of merits? It's not always the bad conversations that they come to us for. But, you know, I think to me, like I said, I just try and be as honest to them, saying that, you know what, you guys know much more than we as HR sometimes. And I guess if you were a business owner, how would you look at it? You know, I mean, what would your decision be? I mean, if that's, you know, you can actually come to answers much better that way than just coming to us and saying, okay, am I going to get fired or am I going to get promoted? You know, either which ways. I think sometimes the writing anything we are aware of before they are. So I think honesty is what I've always
Right
lived by.
approach. Absolutely.
Sharmila, if I could add on to it, and I think I'm complete agreement with what Priya said. I think it's the honesty and the transparency that matters. But you know, the tough questions do not come on day one to you.
Yeah.
So it is also on the HR professional to say what kind of brand are they building for the function and for themselves. That when people come to them, and even if I am able to not tell anything that the person is wanting to know, the person walks away feeling that, yeah, I mean, the guy heard me. He's not going to now victimize me. I got something out of it. If nothing else, I got empathy. You know, if you know that I got understanding of what the situation is, because they also know in their hearts very, very clearly that the function is such, like you can't disclose a lot of financial details. You know, a lot of people details can't be disclosed by the HR professionals, and you carry a lot of data and information in your head and you can't tell. But they walk away feeling that, yes, you know, I had a good conversation, I had a comforting conversation, and a transparent conversation, and like what Priya said, the outcome of that is going to be a fair one. So it's about what brand you create, and like I said, that brand is not created overnight.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, absolutely. So both of you are saying, essentially, when an employee comes to you, they kind of know somewhere in their heart, but they are looking for empathy and being heard, and maybe just guidance in how to think this through. And
sometimes I learn from the employees.
Yeah.
I think this helps them to put their thought process in
Yeah.
their minds correctly, rather than actually hearing it from HR, because it just helps them to, okay, this is what I have been thinking. Now that even the HR is thinking like this, maybe this is the way, this is the right way of looking at it. Maybe that's another way of looking at it.
Yeah. Okay. So, Lekha, for you, so I know iCertis has been doing a lot for its employees during this whole work from home thing, and you guys are thinking of doing this till the end of the year out here. So would you like to talk about some of the initiatives that you and the HR team are doing to make life for the employees better during this work from home?
So I think since March, we have onboarded close to 90 employees, and this has been a completely virtual onboarding that we have done for our employees. So right from delivering laptops to their homes to getting them, inducted virtually through all the sessions that they would have normally done in an office. We are now also trying to do a video of the entire office, so that they also get a feel of how the office looks like, because they are all, they are all very excited to be into the office, but they still are hung up in their homes right now. We're trying to work out that as a model right now and see if we can take a walk through the offices. So that's one thing that we're doing. And then secondly, we are also trying to see if we are again all do a lot of virtual engagements. So we have our learning and OD team that is taken up this initiative. So every Friday we have something different that's happening. So whether it is India, EMEA or US, so US has been doing a virtual lunch every Friday. So they have, figure out some, so they wear a mask and come to the lunch table. So they have actually a virtual lunchroom. Then in India, we are doing a lot of ergonomic sessions, and now we are trying to get some pranayama sessions done. So this is more of a stress buster for people. And in the very first week of COVID, when COVID was still very, very new, we had a doctor on call session that we did with all our employees. So there was this lady doctor who actually went through all the, do's and don'ts, because that time people were really not sure what it was all about. So right from which, medicines or what are the things that you need to do to take care of it. So we started that early. And today, every Friday, we're doing something different. We are engaging employees. We are trying to, there are water cooler conversations that of course keep on happening. There are virtual lunches across different smaller teams also that happen. But yes, we are doing a lot of things. We're just trying to stay engaged with employees and reach out to them as and when they need anything. So we are 24/7 available for them.
That's impressive. Yeah. Priya, this is for you. I spoke about pushing boundaries during any changing thing. It always brings out sort of the creative juices in people out here. So how can we make use of this huge paradigm shift towards work from home? And this is a reality now, whether it's 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, ever. I mean, this is the direction that we are looking at going out here, presuming that's the case out here. What can HR do differently and push themselves out of the whatever they've been doing for so many years out of their comfort zone to take advantage of this? How can we take advantage of this whole change scenario? Other than saving costs on the rentals.
No, I mean, yeah, obviously that's, as a finance person, Sharmila, I'm sure you would.
I just added it just to kind of.
No, but on a serious note, I think there is actually, to me, and it sounds a very cliche, converting a crisis into an opportunity, but frankly, it's really made us have those kind of conversations. I mean, like I said, earlier, like when we were talking about from an HR perspective, even within SunGuard, and I was even reading some, articles and stuff which were there, is actually in the US now they're thinking of the technical companies were essentially in the two coasts. That's where they were, concentrated. And they were never able to really utilize most of the other talent in other places. And how can they now leverage that as a good talent pool, right? And to earlier what Shashank also mentioned, the war for talent is so real now, even in India. I think for us, why should we bind ourselves to the fact that, okay, we have to recruit in Pune and Bangalore because that's where our offices are, right? Why can't we recruit in tier 2 cities? What's stopping us? I think those are the questions that I think we as HR really need to start asking, and not just asking ourselves, but I think it's also being able to have enough data, maybe predictive analysis, and stuff which will be able to convince management and business that it is a viable solution. Because a lot of times these are very nice to say things, and it's like the buzzword, but I think that's where HR's role really needs to come in, is being able to work with not being able to come into work, or night shift was quite, from a safety perspective, a lot of women employees were not willing to do that. So why not look at those options, right? Why not make that a reality? Similarly, disabilities, right? Physical disabilities, which either earlier we would not have been able to maybe customize our entire infrastructure to be able to support people with physical disabilities. Why can't we look at those as a talent pool which we can now actually explore, right? So there are a lot of ways that we could push ourselves, where as HR, and I think we have to be the front runners. One of the things that I was telling my team is we've almost become like this compass during these turbulent times. Business is coming, looking for us, looking to us, saying, okay, how do we ensure employee productivity and engagement? Employees are looking to us saying, okay, for support, care, guidance, compassion. Managers are looking to us saying, okay, how do I make this new normal work? How do I manage people in this new normal? And for a fact, even other enabling departments, right? Like finance, facilities, even they are relying on us to lead the way in adapting to this flexible approach towards some of the traditional processes and stuff like that, right? So I think we are currently in a very unique situation, I guess, where the people are the center of a lot of things which are happening, because employee care, employee engagement has taken a lot more, I would say, importance, and we're moving away from just the workplace to more of a workforce kind of a thing. And I think HR has that unique, I guess, advantage, which I think we should capitalize on. And, we should be able to push ourselves to think differently and get the leaders to think differently. I think that's going to be a huge, personally for me, that's going to be the major game changer, not HR thinking differently, but ensuring the business sees that there is value in thinking differently from a business perspective. It's actually going to be a return on investment for them. And I think that's where, I guess, data analysis, I think that's where we really need to kind of focus efforts on.
Yeah, I agree. This is a whole new area in tier 3 cities. And absolutely, now work from home, anyone can do it. Even if we decide to go back to work, we know work from home can work out here. That's
true.
Yeah. So Sulekha, this is for you. How has the role of HR changed in the last 20 years? When you joined, what was HR about? And how is it today? Is it more enhanced? What is your thing on it? Sulekha, I think you're muted.
Oh, so sorry. Yeah. So I think HR initially was more about maintaining data, Excel sheets, files, and just doing a payroll, it was all limited to that initially. I think now today things have changed completely. So we are more of business leaders. We are working hand in hand with the businesses. We are at the strategy offsites where we are occupying important chair, you would call that. So we are being involved in every business decision that is being taken around. HR business partnering has come a long way. So business today needs HR in everything and whatever they would really like to do. It is no longer an HR operations team or an HR employee, but I think the business needs for HR has also increased considerably. And lots of companies have now started hiring people for the business partner roles, so that they are able to ensure that business needs are met more from an HR perspective. And I think this is the way forward, especially with as Priya was mentioning, a lot of analytics is going to play a big role in the way HR is going to be looked at now. So while we do not, I think HR as a fraternity needs to build on that and gear up for that eventuality that's coming our way. But I think that's really going to be very critical in our sooner than later times.
Right. Yeah. Taking the cue from your answer, my final question to Shashank. You're one of the few people who've risen. All of you have done incredibly well in your HR fields out here. But Shashank, for you, you're one of the few people who's risen really to the top of the business organization on the HR track out here. And that is applaudable. Any advice to all the audience out here and live on Instagram and everything, how they can work their career to get to that position?
So Shapila, one first thing, in all humility, I would say, I don't think this is such a big deal about HR, being in this position. Especially if you keep in mind that, or maybe let me also say, why there's a little bit of excitement about me being in this position today is because there are not too many HR people in that role. Right?
Yes.
But if you look and look around, what kind of people are mostly chief executives? They are finance professionals, they are sales professionals, marketing, operations. So they come from a particular stream of management. Similar. If say a finance person becomes the chief executive, he or she would not have insights over sales or marketing or HR. They have to leverage the collective knowledge of the leadership group there. Similar is for me. I define myself as a business person who has a specialization in HR. And I've used my my time in HR to learn about business, and I've been a very keen student of it. And I think that is what has helped me get here. And I'm sure more and more organizations will go this way, because especially in our kind of industry, in software and high tech industry, 90% of work that you do is about people.
Yeah.
And it makes that much more sense for people leaders to be, in any case, when you hire a chief executive, what do you look at? People skills, right? And HR people grow up in their careers building their people skills. So I don't really see that. I think the only thing the HR professionals have to really be mindful of, how much of business are they learning? Because they learn, HR people learn HR all through their lives. Sometimes you start to believe that is the be all and end all. You have to, they start to think, how does business make money? Why does business exist? What will strengthen the business? What are the business continuity risks that are associated there? How does finance work, and how does sales and marketing work? If you're curious about it, and if you ask the right questions, you will learn. And I think you'll find naturally that there'll be many more people from HR who will go and lead organizations.
Right. Yeah, I agree. And I think this is the time when HR, like you said, IT industry and tech industry is all about people, and HR probably today is the most critical thing, especially during this turbulent times where keeping the team together and people together is so important out here that I think this is the time when we can see more of the Shashanks are coming out here in other companies also. Thank you all so much for this. I learned a lot. I don't know about you all. But I'll hand it to Pavitra. I know there are a lot of questions in the audience out here. And so, Pavitra, do you want to take it from here?
Thank you, Sharmila. Thank you, all the panel members. We have a few questions. I know we all are running short of time, so I'll quickly take a couple of them. The questions will be open to all, and you can choose to answer. So the first question that's come from an audience is, can an employee refuse to report to work due to fear of contracting the virus? And how would you deal with such cases? Any one of you can answer.
At BMC, we have not decided when we are returning to office. It's likely going to be beyond October. And even then, our call is that people can choose to come to office or work, or they don't. Frankly, for us, it doesn't really matter. In the last 2.5 months that we have been working from home, like iCertis, we started working from home on the 10th or 11th of March. And nothing is broken. So today we are at that point that we really don't care as an organization where you're working from. So if somebody comes to me and says that I can't really come to office, or I don't want to come to office, perfectly fine. I think the comfort in your mind, because this is, and let's also understand, why would people refuse to come to work today? Because there's a risk to life. Right. There's a risk to life, not only of the individual concerned, but that of the family member. Yeah. We always have a risk to life every day when we drive on to work. We could be with an accident. But here you have a risk of bringing back the virus at your homes. So if an employee says, I'm not comfortable, so I think fine. But the organizations will have to evolve their philosophies around that. Also, it is possible at some point in time, the organizations will also say what roles can definitely work remotely. And that categorization, I'm sure most organizations are already doing and identifying.
Yeah, correct. So I think even what Shashank said, I think basically even when we are planning to kind of return to work, I think what we're looking at is first the critical roles. Right. And in those critical roles, we will give people first a voluntary choice if they want to come back to work or not. I mean, not in India currently, but in the US and other places where, the lockdown is over. So that's what we're looking at. And definitely if somebody is not willing to come back to work, we are giving them the first choice of refusal. And then accordingly working out what could be the alternative options.
Yeah, so same at iCertis as well. So we've just identified a population which is going to be very, very, the young mothers, people with older parents. So they will definitely not be the part of the first few months cycle when people start resuming to work. And again, only critical roles, and absolutely it will be people's prerogative to decide whether they really want to start working from home. We have some people who are already in Kolkata and they don't even know when I'm going to come back. So we're just going to leave it at that right now.
Okay. I think there are a few more questions which is related to what answers you gave. So I'll just take those. A person wants to know which part of the support activity can really continue to work from home? If you had to plan, what would you do differently to enable the productivity happens properly? So out of the support functions, which ones do you feel that can continue working from home? Because we all know like support is a kind of function which is there around people at office, taking care of stuff. So any thoughts on those lines?
I can take that. So if you'd asked me this question, Pavitra, maybe 3 months back, I would have said none of the support functions can work from home. But yeah, I guess all of us have been forced to think differently. I guess all of us definitely, all support functions to a great extent have been able to work from home. Definitely HR and finance to a great extent has been able to do it. I think facilities and administration might be a little bit challenging, considering that they have to do a lot more with the workplace management. And, from that perspective, I think that would be the only support function that we could think of currently, which, like I said, when we put together the criticality of who needs to come back to work first, they might be the ones that we might look at getting back to work initially. But apart from that, I guess most functions have been able to work pretty much seamlessly for the last 2.5 months without a single hitch. So I think, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I'll give you an example and completely agree with Priya. We have a function called the order services, which books the orders that comes in. It's one of the most critical business operations during the end of the quarter. Last 2 weeks up until the midnight of the 31st of March, for example, that happened there. Before we hit that period here, we were contemplating that should we allow people to sneak into the office and do whatever, and then we said no, let that happen, because there's a lot of printing that is required. Typically in a traditional way, the orders come in, it has to be printed, signed by the services person, and then it's faxed back or mailed back. We did nothing of that sort. All the employees were working from home, and we didn't miss a single order. And this was Q4 for us, almost, I think Q4 is always the biggest quarter for us. And we didn't miss a single order. So that's the power of technology that is available. It's only a matter of gaining that confidence, and it's like building a new muscle. Right. And I think all organizations have successfully shown that that's possible.
Right. I'll take just one or two more questions because we're short of time. So Sachin wants to know, what are employers' obligations regarding self-isolating or quarantined employees? Any such cases which has come up, or what would you do in such cases?
So as part of our return to office plan, every floor in our office will have a separate meeting room, which is now getting converted to an isolation room. So in case we ever happen to have an employee who tests positive while at work, that room will be used here. But having said that, we're also we're doing all those precautions that are necessary, right, from thermal readings and getting in a medical, getting employees to fill. We will get employees to fill a form to say, about their contacts and what's happening, where they live, etc., etc. So I think the responsibility that will finally vest with the organization for sure to quarantine people if something happens within the workplace. And I hear, and I've been talking to a lot of other people, a lot of real estate folks, and I think every organization is getting up similarly to do some sort of that.
Okay. The next question is basically from a working mother. Maybe she wants to understand, because the schools reopening is very uncertain. So a lot of parents have this pressure of a child being at home. So any policies designed for parents who don't have an option of leaving their child somewhere outside? From the HR point of view, any one of you want to talk about it? Because you might have employees or parents, working parents, who don't have that option right now.
We continue to ask them to work from home on a longer basis. Okay. And I think this is going to be very, very important, because every family, every house, there's going to be either an old parent or a young child in the house. And with schools being fresh and everything being closed, I think this is the least we should be able to do for our employees. Right. We'll continue to do that. So they will never become the part of the critical population.
Can I add a very non-HRish response to it?
Yeah, sure.
I would tell, don't bring all the problems to the employer. there's some things that people need to manage on their own. The employers are there to support. If you lump everything, it is just like on the employer, it virtually becomes unmanageable for organizations. There are going to be, as many employees are there, there are going to be like 3 times dimensions of the problems that people might have.
Correct.
Employers can't sort out all those problems. Individually, I think all of us as employees also need to take responsibility of what's right for us. And then work with your chain of management to see whether that's acceptable, not acceptable. Is there a middle way to be found or not? And this is where I also feel sometimes the HR needs to get a little bit more assertive. We want to be nice. So being nice does not mean, you become a doormat where everybody comes and says, okay, you help me. You help yourself and the HR will definitely help you.
Right. Yeah. That's a valid point. So yeah, we are almost done with all the questions. Before I end this session, I would like to thank all the panelist members for sharing your insights. Thank you, Shashank, Priya, Sulekha. It was lovely interacting with you. And I would like to also thank the audience here and the live audience for being a part of this webinar. Anything related to food or employee wellness program, you can reach out to us. We are there to help you guys out. So thank you so much. Thanks for your time and stay safe.
Thank you, everybody, and stay safe. All of you.
Getting to know you all much better here.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.